This is Future Sense Now, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. Future Sense Now is brought to you by the Futures Forum. Stay tuned for a journey to the future with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of Future Sense Now, an online e-magazine of the Futures Forum. It is May 2018, and this month we're celebrating World Telecommunications and Information Society Day with an exploration into the futures of artificial intelligence. The theme of this year's celebration is enabling the positive use of artificial intelligence for all. And we'll focus on how AI might accelerate the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Now, from my perspective, we all have been hearing about progress in AI technology, and we know this is due to big data and machine learning and computing power and search capacity and all these things. And supposedly AI is emerging as a key component of proactive tools being used to help people lead better lives by improving healthcare. The question that I have to ask is this really so? And today we'll be speaking with Mr. HAYNES and Mr. GABRIEL ABED, both Caribbean Barbadians, to be precise, in the field who are working diligently to bring the Caribbean into the 21st century. Andre is the Chief Architect and Product Manager, or was the Chief Architect and Product Manager of Bitt, a Caribbean fintech startup, which is using blockchain and other mobile money products in the Caribbean region. He also created something called the BTC Poker Stats. I like to hear about AI cheating and poker right there. But apart from that, he also has been using experience in architecting analytics and blockchain-based products to chart a vision for the company where he now is at, which is Tomakak Products and Services. So we'll hear more about his work in AI and blockchain. And Mr. GABRIEL ABED is the founder of Bitt Incorporated and the Digital Asset Fund, which is recognized as a leading Caribbean authority on digital currencies, math-based protocols, and blockchain technology. So without further ado, let's jump right into conversation with these two gentlemen. Greetings and welcome again. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Claire.
Thank you for having us, Dr. Nelson.
Yes. Well, to come back to this whole idea of AI, for me, I must say I have some mixed feelings. I'm working with this futurist bot, and on the one hand, I'm going to get much information, but because my consciousness with AI was with movies like iRobot and Star Trek, and those things seem far away, but now that it's upon me, and we're contemplating smart bots like Alexa and Siri and AI flying my plane and AI writing stories and playing music. I'm like, what really is the possibility that AI is going to help accelerate operational efficiency for a human future, or the possibility of AI as being something that might actually negate a human future? Which is the real world in which we are emerging from your perspective?
I'll tackle this one. Yeah, I'll tackle this one first. I think it is a very timely time for the discussion, of course. More recently in the big data field, we had some privacy issues with Facebook coming up in the last month, perhaps misusing or being complicit in the misuse of our personal data. And just last week, I saw a Google I/O conference with these smart bots that are doing calls on your behalf as a personal assistant. So, I mean, we're getting quite advanced in AI. It seems to be happening overnight in many ways, because 5 years ago, we certainly weren't talking about self-driving cars and all these AI-based products to the same degree that we are today. What kind of future are we in or heading towards? Is it the one where, that you see in the iRobot movies, or is it a much more utopian future? I think it's going to be a bit of both. At the end of the day, technology is a tool, and that tool, how it's used, depends on the human actors that wield that tool. So, there's some very smart people working on not only the technical aspects of AI, but also some of the ethical quandaries that are going to come up.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, you have anything to add to that, or you want to say nothing? Because, I mean, on the issue of blockchain, I don't know much about that either. I mean, I know enough what everybody knows. But when we talk about things like ending poverty and hunger everywhere and trying to build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, and the idea that ICT is going to be the backbone of this digital economy and help us to progress, does blockchain in combination with AI then address the challenge of financial access?
Oh, absolutely. Because now the artificial intelligence layers have an autonomous ledger system and financial system that they can interface with. Economic value previously was represented in usually offline manual systems. Oftentimes they were also represented as physical assets. With the advent of blockchain, we're able to represent commodities, assets, and currencies digitally. And with this comes the interface with artificial intelligence. So it actually, the two go hand in hand, from the perception of being able to give the user a more seamless experience, all the way down from running an organized. Let's look at a sample of artificial intelligence in your refrigerator. You run out of milk, the AI detects that, detects your average consumption rate, and then goes ahead and places an order and pays for it. And not to say that it couldn't be done with the traditional Apple Pay and Visa and MasterCard. It's just right now you have more of a interfaceable, programmable currency that AI can make sense of, utilize, and talk to. Those systems are open and, in essence, more adequate for AI than other traditional financial systems.
But I want to really stick on this for a minute, because this is part of where my big, I would say, like, split in my head goes. Right? As an engineer, of course, I'm fascinated by technology advancement, but I'm like, to what end? So are you telling me that this technology, which, let's say, the average farmer brown or the average poor person in Nigeria doesn't know anything about, blockchain and AI together, blockchain and fintech together, are going to enable, let's say, the farmer to be able to sell his goods at a price that is going to make his life better, his or her, I should say. No gender.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from one of the cool things that blockchain brings about as well as chain of custody, and being able to observe the entire supply chain. And in the case of a farmer, from production all the way to crop rotation and harvesting to market cycles, working out price discovery and things along those lines. I mean, this is actually Andre's. This is
right, I'm gonna come up and ask Andre that question, because okay, so AI can do this, but I'm hearing now about artificial generalized intelligence. So that is AI that is learning to be more intelligent on its own. So not that you have programmed it, it can go out and say, oh, this is sound like something I've heard before, and learn to do something else. How do we ensure, if we look at then this money matters, let's say, an AI, or supply chain for farmers and AI, how do we look at these emerging new versions of AI, AGI, as I'm hearing it being talked about, and think about the ethics of the design process?
You know, it's a very important question. And like I said earlier, some very smart people are thinking very deeply about these questions right now. In particular, Nick Bostrom wrote a very informative and influential book on the matter called Superintelligence. In any case, it is important to address this now, because the area of the field is growing so quickly. AGI, honestly, as an AI researcher or someone in the field, I don't think it is, you know, maybe it's not a decade out or 15 years out. It might be 50 years out. But when you do a survey of all of the AI researchers, they tend to say, well, we don't really know when AGI is going to happen. But we could start comparing, you know, start addressing some of these ethical questions right now. Because perhaps in 50 years, 60 years, certainly within a century, these issues are going to be very relevant ethical issues for our society. So the whole Terminator scenario with an AGI kind of taking over and being programmed to kill us or something like that. I do think that's a bit far-fetched, but there are some issues we need to be concerned with right now, even before we can hit that point of AGI. When you train these AIs, when you train any machine learning algorithm, one very important component of that training process, learning process they call it, the objective function that you set for these machines. So you can have, you can give a very loose or ill-specified objective to, an algorithm, and if you give it a very big world, to operating, very many ways to solve that issue, you, the researcher, can't really predict how it's going to solve it. So, the toy example, a lot of speakers is, well, you tell the AI, the AGI to solve world hunger, solve climate change, or something like that. And instead of doing in an ill-specified objective like that, it might decide to wipe out the human race because we're the big polluters of the planet and biggest influencers in climate change. So guys like Nick Bostrom and others are looking at frameworks to help specify some very responsible and well-defined objectives for AI. And that's again in preparation for this AGI horizon, maybe 50 years out or something.
So this whole idea of ethics and AI for me is really a big thing, because from a developing country perspective, do we have, okay, the rules of the game of the global architecture, if you will? I know that there are various organizations such as, the World Telecommunications, and there's the radio spectrum people, there's all kind of rules of the game from different angles of this technology system. But do we have enough people who are really understanding the space in which we are being asked to participate in a global game? Do we have enough people in the parliaments, in the technical policy offices of countries such as a Barbados, a Jamaica, a Nigeria, a Ghana, to really articulate the perspective of the people of those countries in a way that the sort of ethical algorithms and therefore ethical policies can be put on the table from day one? Do we have that?
Dr. Nelson, the easy answer is absolutely no. We have a very aged membership in our governance models. And what I mean by that is the persons that are in leadership right now lack the understanding of the field of technology. And I don't think AI is even on their radars yet. That's the truth. They aren't thinking about the amendments of laws that have to come up. They're not thinking about the impact to their state and their society. They're not thinking about the value benefits of automation and crop rotation, crop production, sorry. They're not thinking about the mass job displacement that's coming down the line from things like it. So the short answer is no. They're not there in developed nations fully, and they're far from there in jurisdictions like Barbados and.
So, but we have academic systems, we have learning systems. The question I'm asking as a woman of a certain age, who's an engineer by training, but they say, oh my God, this is so far from what I studied when I was moving my decks on my Fortran programming from point A. I like to brag. I was around when the first simulation programs were being written by Pritzker and Associates. It's like way back in the beginning of that kind of work. But I hear what you're saying. And so for me, when you look at a system where we're saying, okay, we're pushing this idea of a more just and equitable world, we're hearing that AI could impact the future of prosperity for poor people in negative ways because it's going to supposedly take away some jobs, right? Especially in the richer countries. We know that countries who are developing want to move faster to be less underdeveloped, and therefore they must absorb some technology. What are some of the ways in which your companies, I can't pronounce them again, Tomakak, right, Andre? And Bitt can help as private sector to sort of be part of the transformation process. How can companies like yours partner with civil society, forget government, partner with civil society and academia to begin that education, awareness, and transformation process from, let's say, the grassroots up? How do you think even AI can help make that transformation process happen?
That's a great question. I think to answer the first part of the question, Bitt is a great example of how companies can be responsible and grow the tech talent, in particular in the Caribbean, small island developing states.
Yes.
I can tell you, 4 or 5 years ago in Barbados, the tech landscape was next to nil. If you were a developer coming back from doing a degree in CS or math overseas, coming back to Barbados, the best you could hope for as far as a technology job goes, maybe working for a website company building websites for small businesses. Ever since it would have brought this blockchain revolution to the Caribbean. And not only that, it actually attracted a lot of blockchain companies and high-tech companies now to come, scope out some talent in areas like Barbados and Jamaica, even set up incubators, set up workshops, and start really training that base and educating them. Because for them, the value add is clear. Why pay a Canadian developer or an American developer $100,000 a year USD when you can grow the talent, which is just as talented, if not better, in places like Barbados and Jamaica, pay them a fraction of that cost. So I think capitalism is doing that for us. We just need to break that open and show the world what we can do. A similar thing will hold true for the AI side of things. My company in particular, we already have some employees in Barbados. We're going to grow the talent pool even more, and in so doing, the people, some people there will have at very least an awareness of some of the technological issues, but more importantly, some of them will have the opportunity to have skills and very forward-facing future in this.
Gabriel, would you agree with that assessment of how private sector companies like yours might go forward?
Absolutely. Andre hit the nail on the head. And I think right now one of the more important things that they need to do as well is start supporting the grassroots innovation as well. And what I mean by that is empowering the youth and making sure they're prepared for the working world ahead of them. And it's not just to be the next lawyer or accountant, but to be the next technologist.
Yeah, because I mean, this whole idea of social transformation, a social change, and the idea that we're moving towards this more prosperous world requires that we begin now to make sure as you say, the ICT sector really is not creating a further gap. Right now, I mean, there's a big conversation last year on net neutrality in the US. I'm not sure how that's playing out in the Caribbean region. There's one thing to have a smartphone, but can you afford the credit to be online looking for data? Are there enough, let's say, spaces in public libraries? Are companies supporting Wi-Fi hotspots so kids who don't have the ability to have these things at home are able to go and sit and do work and learn, be curious about inventing. So there's that sort of things. I do want to ask another question though, and this idea about the shared rules. To come back to this idea about the shared rules. So we have, I'm sure, some global entity that's looking at the shared rules around AI and IP of algorithms and transparency. If you had to pick one challenge, especially from a Caribbean perspective, where AI could have a really critical impact, which challenge would you want to pick? And that's a question for you, Gabriel, and a question for you, Andre. So Gabriel, start.
Government.
You guys say it's obvious, right? Finance.
No. Government and the management of resources.
Oh, really? Wow.
I'd want to start with, you did say pick a topic. But
no, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I know some governments in the Caribbean are toying with the idea of e-government, but they're just looking at it from an ID perspective. I don't know if they're really serious about it from the process of really making transformative change. So continue your conversation on what you think that would look like, Gabriel.
Well, I mean, I would look at a resource-driven center like a water authority that's managed by government as an example. And how would the decisions be made on a individual basis? So as opposed to the current method of where we have representative democracy, and we elect somebody to represent us on the macro basis and the micro basis, and they make all those decisions. We as citizens can now start making micro decisions on a near daily basis, and maybe we delegate micro votes to someone who knows more than us to make that decision, or maybe we make it ourselves. And that's one form of initial governance being applied. But then how AI would come in after that would be from the perception of what kind of data are fed to consumers and how they're passing data, how their votes are interfaced with, and how you can build more of a smarter system of governance around resources.
Yeah, and you're thinking a small island, I mean, like a Barbados and like a Jamaica, with all the Internet of Things and the sensors, etc. We could do, for example, smart decisions around water would be one. Andre, what is your pick?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Gabriel on that point. I would focus in on the efficiency gains that both these technologies can bring, both AI and blockchain bring unprecedented efficiency to processes that we have today. I mean, blockchain or AI does not really change systems necessarily. It helps us to build better systems. So in the Caribbean, I mean, in Barbados especially, we're just bogged down with so much inefficiency. And I think these technologies give us the ability to leapfrog and really, improve our, prospects for growth and value creation. And that's not to say that we're going to be competitive with first world countries necessarily, but we're going to improve so significantly from where we are today by adopting these technologies. There's an argument made that some facets of the blockchain revolution, for example, might not be that appealing to a first world nation because these countries that have PayPal, they have email money transfers, digital subsidies. On the other hand, in Barbados and Jamaica, we don't have nearly developed payment infrastructure.
Oh my God, let's not even go down that road because there's a big issue because, and this is probably for a different conversation. I have to come back to you for that conversation because this issue has come up in terms of even diaspora investing. If diaspora don't have, like $1 million to invest, but we have, $1,000 to invest, and in this case, let's call it more impact investment. Let's say, for example, nonprofits like the Institute of Caribbean Studies and other NGOs are wanting to engage with, high schools, for example, to create labs, and we can hire these kids to do social media, for example. So like a work study program. But there's no way to process that payment that's not expensive. So it's already a small amount of money that we're kind of trying to transfer to test the model of impact investment for kids who say are poor, they're going to school, they're in sixth form, they want to earn like extra change, and we can hire them to do stuff for us. But there's no payment system that is affordable, that is legal, because right now with the whole de-risking issue, and then the companies that are in that space, which is the PayPal or the Fiverr or whatever, it's very expensive for these young people. So that's certainly one area which I hope that can come to. Let's be drawn to a close. One other area I want to bring up is this issue of tourism. All the Caribbean economies are very tourism bound. How do you see AI in particular possibly impacting on tourism, both negatively and positively? This will be my last heavy question.
That's a really interesting question. First of all, addressing the point that our Caribbean economies are very tourism bound. This is something I feel strongly about. I think tourism is a bit too volatile for us to, depend on far into the future. If we go into a global financial crisis, not many people are going to be traveling. Very significant impacts on our economy, as we've seen in recent years, especially in Barbados. How can AI affect tourism in the Caribbean? I'm not sure. It definitely changed the landscape of service industry. Service industry is one sector that will be changed, and this is perhaps even one of the first sectors to be transformed by AI. I had the fortune to go to Japan a couple of years ago. It was very interesting to see, like, they're the technophiles over there, largely. And it was interesting to see how, like an everyday restaurant is set up. There was one guy in the middle, and basically the chef, and everything else was a machine. You order outside from a vending machine, you take it outside and you sit down. So no waiters, no tipping, nothing like that.
I don't think it's going to happen in the Caribbean because there were many votes. The reason why I was laughing, all of a sudden when you were talking, I got a flashback of a scene, like an AI phone system, in the Caribbean perspective. Hello? What you want? Babe? I said, call, press number. I can imagine a Jamaican AI customer service bot. I think that is going to be something very different from the traditional service. But
absolutely. Let's hope that they train them with the requisite high standards. But it is that in particular is very relevant. I know last week they demonstrated an AI chatbot that, like I mentioned at the start, would allow you to call and make appointments on your behalf. And there's some real, this is another side point, but there's some interesting privacy issues there. In an AI-driven service economy, should you know that you're interacting with an AI on the phone, for example, or does the company owe us any disclaimer? Do they need to inform us that this is the AI agent, not necessarily a human agent? These are all questions that are going to be very relevant, very, very relevant.
I do think we're drawing to a close here. Is there any headline story that you would like to see in the year 2030 in the Caribbean that AI has achieved?
Yeah, definitely.
AI and complete governance.
Healthcare and AI for disease detection. And that's just one thing we didn't address. AI is going to transform healthcare.
Yes. Please bring me telehealth, AI health. For that one, you have me sold. If you decide to do that, you're going to have me as a buyer, a seller, an advocate, an evangelist for the cause. So are you optimistic, pessimistic, or neutralistic? That's my word about the potential impact of AI to transform and create a better future.
Very, very optimistic. I think it's going to transform, both AI and blockchain are going to transform the world as we know it in ways that we cannot even imagine right now. Future 10 years from now is going to look very, very different from today. You'll have AI as a doctor, you might just go to your doctor's appointment on video and put your finger on a phone or something like that. It'll be a very interesting time.
Yeah. Gabriel, would you agree? Optimistic, pessimistic, or neutralistic?
I'm extremely optimistic. The advent of AI has already started to show some beautiful progression. I mean, let's face it, AI right now is nowhere where it's meant to be. Artificial intelligence implies that human corruption is non-existent. Human influence in the actual decision-making process. And we're not really there yet, but the strides being made by industry leaders are showing progress at leaps and bounds. And when we do break that barrier, it's going to happen quickly, spread very fast. And I'm extremely positive about the future of it, because the topic right now is about more people than ever are talking about it, more money than ever is flowing into the industry. More companies are being formed, and more young people like Andre are coming out to start supporting it. It could only be a positive effect from there.
Well, folks, there you have it. We have two optimistic Young Turks in the Caribbean, Mr. Andre Haynes and Mr. GABRIEL ABED. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So again, we want to thank you for joining us on Future Sense Now, where we've been talking to Andre Haynes, who is at Tomakak, a company that's in the business of creating the future. Likewise, GABRIEL ABED, founder of Bitt and the Digital Asset Fund, also in the business of creating thriving futures in the Caribbean region. We want to thank you for joining us on Future Sense Now, where we explore salient ideas for sustainable futures. And yes, we have come to the end of a great conversation, but the story of our future continues being written by all of us. Remember, the future is written in the DNA of the past and the landscape of the present, and we are parents of our shared future. As we say in Jamaica, walk good, safe journey.
You have been listening to Future Sense Now with Dr. Claire Nelson, brought to you by the Futures Forum. For more, please visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share the future.